is making and receiving offers. I am off of mute. Okay, great. So hopefully you've received your participants guide. Katie sent that out this morning, and you also will need your script book today because we're going to be doing some role playing. So if you haven't downloaded your toolkit from the script, oh, okay. I was like, what's that chatting? If you haven't downloaded your script book, please do so because we will be referencing that in this class. Okay, so we're going to get started. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, awesome. Okay, move this over a second. Okay, so you have been for the last, I would say 3 weeks now, been focusing on growing your business and running your business. In growing your business, of course, you've concentrated on lead generate for buyers and sellers, making listing presentations, making buyer presentation, previewing real estate. So everyone should be very familiar with those things, how to grow your business. Today we're going to focus on running the business, specifically on making and receiving offers. Tomorrow you'll talk about negotiating contracts. Transaction management, you should be, is one of the things you run your business. Vendor management, setting goals, compliance, attending training, and getting coaching and making and managing your money. So those things, I'm trying to move this little toolbar around a little bit for me. Those are the things that you should be doing on a regular basis to grow and run your business. So today, as we said, we're going to talk about making and receiving offers. So how many of you on the call today has actually written an offer or accepted an offer? So no one on the call has written any offers?
I have.
Oh, yes, I have. I couldn't take myself off mute.
Okay. All right. Who is on here who has never written an offer or accepted an offer?
Me.
Tonda. Tonda. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, Gail.
Okay. And Gail. Tonda and Gail? Okay. All right. Well, hopefully this will help you as in future offers, or it will help you when you go to write an offer. Okay. So the offer process. When your buyer finds a home, the first thing you have to do is get yourself together and explain to them what the offer process looks like. Okay. So the buyer makes an offer. The seller will respond in one of 3 ways. They can counter the offer, and at that point, you would negotiate what those counter items are. Okay. Tomorrow, again, you'll focus, most of the class tomorrow is on negotiation. So we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on accepting the offer and rejecting the offer. That's the other 2 options. They can accept the offer. Once the contract is accepted, you move to the contract to close process. Okay. If it's rejected, which we highly encourage sellers not to reject, but at that point, the buyer should contact the listing agent and to learn a little bit more, because sometimes they've rejected it for something really minor, and you can negotiate that. So it's important for you to be in constant communication with the listing agent. So say once you make the offer, this is the time where you have to be patient. And as an agent, you have to be skilled on negotiating. You have to have great negotiating skills. You have to have knowledge of the whole process. So it's important for you to read your contracts, understand the contract, because if you have any questions related to the contract, that way you can answer any questions your buyer may have. So during this process, how do you think the buyers or sellers are feeling at this stage? They've received an offer, the buyer has made an offer. What's the feelings that are going on right now from both parties?
Anxious.
Anxious? What else?
I think it depends on the offer, how close for the seller side, how close is the offer to what they actually want and or need,
Okay.
depending on the case on the seller side. And the buyers are anxious because this is one of the largest purchases they may ever make in their lives, and it's a big deal. So yeah, anxiety.
Anxiety, exactly. Could it be some excitement?
Absolutely. That's how my sellers were. As soon as we got the offer, they got so excited they couldn't wait for closing day.
Okay. So emotions are running kind of hot by both parties, either with excitement or anxiety. So that's why it's very important for you to be calm and be the professional that you are. You have to reassure that everything's, going to work out. You have to communicate everything to your client. Okay. So any step in the process, you need to communicate to your client. There are some guides that's in Keller Williams on the buying and selling process. So be familiar with that so that you can communicate. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So how do we prepare the offer? Okay. In your participants guide, there's a checklist to prepare the offer. Do you have that? It's actually on page 3 of the participants guide. Do most of you have that? It looks like this. This is a sample of it. Katie sent out the participants guide this morning.
Yeah, I got it this morning.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to review this a little bit with you, and you just provide some feedback as we go through. Okay. One of the things on the checklist to prepare is you have to have the buyer's pre-approval letter from the lender. The reason being is because it has some important information in order for you to write the contract. It also is like cash in the bank. It's like that buyer is approved, and if a seller receives an offer without a pre-approval letter and they receive an offer with one, they're more likely to lean to your offer because they know that your buyer has taken the time to get a pre-approval letter. So it's important for you to communicate with the buyer's lender so that you can be aware of what the buyer is approved for, any contingencies, meaning that if they need any kind of closing costs, understanding what the interest rates are, because in the contract, there are certain things that you have to complete. So I would once you are working with your buyer and you have that consultation, make sure that you communicate with the lender. Produce a CMA, okay? How many of you out there have done a CMA, or at least a partial? And can, as you are writing an offer, produce one for your buyer to let them know what the market looks like for the property that they're interested in. So how many of you have done that?
I do it on everyone.
On everyone, okay. Why do you do that?
Well, I think it gives them a realistic point of view, especially I found it most valuable when I have those clients that want to always lowball people.
Exactly.
I find it very valuable showing them what the comps are in the market and letting them know that this is why I don't advise you to do that. And I also do it for my first-time home buyers because sometimes they feel like they're overpaying if they're in like a high demand market, and I show them the comps. It gives them a little bit of reassurance that they're not overpaying for the house and they really are getting the value based upon the comp set, and it makes them feel comfortable when they're writing for such a large offer.
Okay, awesome. So so most of you know the importance of doing a CMA. We will tonight at our group coaching for PCs, we're going to actually walk through a CMA and show you today how to perform a CMA so you can be familiar with it if you are not. Reviewing tax records. Why would you do that? To get the history of the property. Does anyone?
Why?
Make sure that they don't owe anything on the property.
Okay, but even if they owe, even if the seller owes money on the property, what does that what insight can that provide for the buyer?
I mean, you're looking at, there might be liens. You're also looking at what the taxes are going to be every year.
Okay.
I found it comes in handy, especially in Orleans Parish, because they like to charge a lot of money for taxes. And usually the larger the square footage of a house, the higher the taxes. So it gives the client a good look of what they're going to be paying and what's going to be put into their escrow account.
Right, for closing and for closing costs.
And for closing costs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you can go to Realist Tax to look that information up in the MLS. Ensure the property is still available before spending time on preparing an offer. The worst thing that can happen is that your client is so excited, you go rush to write an offer to find out the contract. I mean, the property is under contract. So it is very important for you to contact the listing agent, making sure that the property is still active. And if it's still active, what's the activity on the property? Have they had a lot of showings? Do they anticipate additional offers coming in? Because all of those questions can give you a better idea of how to write your offer for your client. Because if they know they're going to be in competition, hopefully they're less likely to lowball the offer or want to lowball the offer. Okay. So it's very important for you to be in constant communication with the listing agent. You want to gather rapport as much, like I said, as much information as possible from the listing agent. Build rapport with the agents, because sometimes you'll have a situation where the agents are in constant battle. This is not about a battle. This is we're going to win this together. So you want to work together for a win-win relationship. Ask questions to the seller about motivation. To listing agent about the seller's motivation, because maybe you can find out that they need to move really quickly, or that they have to relocate for another job, or so that you'll know exactly what their motivation is, right? Consider some you may want to ask the question, would the seller consider closing costs? So just really be in relation with the agent. The next thing is you need to pull down the property disclosures from the MLS, because when you're preparing the offer, you need to read over those property disclosures with your client and look at red flags. If the disclosures have anything about termite damage, but they don't have a contract, that's something that you want to discuss with the listing agent and discuss with your client, because this, to me, if they don't have a contract and they've had previous termite damage, that could be a red flag for your client. All right. And we talked about if there are previous offers. Okay. Any questions related to that process of preparing the offer? Anybody want to add some information on their experience about preparing?
I have a question, because, well, you know what I'm going through. And I know that you said to reach out to the listing agent, but since it's a bank-owned property and it's on offer, it seemed like I spoke to the listing agent, but it seemed like he doesn't want to answer too many questions about the property.
So just FYI, it's a bank-owned property. Pretty much the listing agents are kind of servicer for the bank. They don't know, they're not knowledgeable about anything related to disclosures on the property, because they're not communicating with the actual previous seller, and the bank doesn't know. So the bank, bottom line on a listing agent who is working for a bank is, what is the net to the seller? They really don't go into much emotion related to those types of listings. So you're not going to get much information for most of those from bank-owned properties, from listing agents. Okay. Any other questions, concerns?
I just want to make a statement. It's a little farther along, but you mentioned about having to negotiate sometimes. Sometimes you also have to negotiate with the buyer, with your client, for maybe when the seller um, um, counters,
Mhm.
and you might need to negotiate with your client to find out, like, if they can, if it's something that like you were saying, termite damage, uh are you willing to, we can ask for a contract, have a treatment and ask for a contract. And if your buyer is like, well, why should I do that, are you willing to walk away from this house that you love for, if they say no? So
Mhm.
sometimes you have to negotiate with your client too.
Right. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I like the fact that the script is, are you willing to walk away from the house that you love? I love that script in that you put emotion and you make the buyer their emotions come out, because if they love this house, they're willing to think about certain things that they probably wouldn't have. They're not looking for the perfect house. They're willing to do some work on a house, or but I love the fact that you brought out the emotion when you said that. Anything else? Okay, so let's write the offer. Okay, there's a checklist for that as well. So on page 4 of the participants guide is a checklist to write an offer. Okay, so there's things that you need to know ahead of time when you're writing an offer. Okay, you want to consult with your buyer, of course, on what price, but that they want to arrive at. But please review the CMA so that you can gear them in the right direction, because you will have, especially you need to know what the market of today is. So today we're in a seller's market, a strange seller's market right now because of what's going on. However, before that, we were still in a seller's market where properties were, when they're hot, they're selling quickly. Okay. And they're in multiple offer situations, particularly in certain areas. So in a hot seller's market, your buyers can't say, well, let me, lowball an offer and give them, and they want closing costs and they want a home warranty. All those things in a seller's market, a buyer you should be consulting with them, letting them know, if you love this house, this lowball offer is not going to work. In a buyer's market, when there's a lot of inventory, they have more room for negotiation, because the seller is, just happy to get an offer, because sometimes, the time on days on market is longer. So right now, I know you still, everybody wants a bargain. They always want to, haggle and negotiate, but this is not the time, particularly if you're in a seller's market. So consult with your buyer on the most logical offer based on the CMA. You also want to say, what's the list to sell price? Because if the list to sell price in that area is like 99%, and the seller already knows that, because if they have a great agent, they've already reviewed that with them, then that's what they expect. They're going to get 99% of their list price. So explain that to them as well. Seller's disclosures, okay, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to pull them off the MLS, which in the MLS on every listings, there's a document folder to the left that looks like, it says attachments, but it looks like little white documents. So that's where the disclosures you can find. Conveyances. Typically you need to find out, for instance, what's going to convey with the sale. In the contract, there are things that are already in the contract that conveys. Anything that's fixed to the property, attached fixtures, are typically conveyed with the property. However, there are things that your client may want to be included in the purchase agreement. For instance, appliances, that you can add to the contract. Keep in mind that things like carpet allowances and other furniture, it's those are movable items, so that would have to be negotiated separately. However, anything that a lender will, view as something that can be conveyed, like appliances, can be included. Earnest money deposit. Okay, so with the earnest money deposit, the buyer should make a deposit to the seller to show good faith. Now, in Louisiana, some states, that requires 2 to 3%, right? In Louisiana, close to 1%. For some reason, typically in this area, $1,000 is the number, right? It's $1,000. On HUD properties, if it's under 50,000, you can go get away with 500. But we don't put a lot of escrow money. If you were in any other state, it would be anywhere from 1 to 3%. That shows I'm interested in this property, and the seller can take this off the market because I'm serious about buying the house. So we have this $1,000 magic price. In some higher end properties, the seller may require more. So keep that in mind. Some bank-owned properties, they may require more. So just keep in mind, this is a negotiating item of how much money that the buyer will have to put down to show good faith, okay? Time for seller acceptance. On the last page of the contract, there's a statement that says expiration. And that is the time that the buyer is presenting the offer to the seller. However, does the seller have to respond by that time? Who knows the answer to that? If the buyer presents an offer and they give the seller an expiration date, does the seller have to respond by that expiration date? Anyone know?
If they
Yes, or
want
else
to
the
do it,
contract is
yeah.
void.
Wait, would you say, Jimmy?
I said yes, or else the contract is void.
Okay. Jar.
That was kind of my same thing. Like if the seller wants they need to do it by the day, but if they don't, they can just let it expire.
Correct. So sometimes you'll have an agent like, why didn't the seller respond? They don't have to, but it's in their best interest if they really want to sell the house. But keep in mind, it's not required by that time, okay? Bank-owned properties never respond by your expiration date. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure you put out at least maybe 5 days to give them time to respond so your contract does not void out, okay? Because once it expires, it's voided. You have to write a new contract, okay? Financing terms. Again, you need to make sure that you communicate with the lender so that you know what the financing term is going to be. You need to know what type of loan, what percentage they have to put down, and if they need any kind of closing costs. The buyer's pre-approval, the loan approval, closing date. You need to talk to the lender about what's a reasonable closing date. Most loans can close in 45 days under typical circumstances. But if you're working with a grant program or overlay of a different program, you're going to need 60, sometimes 90 days to close on a property. But most of them can close in 45 days. Conventional, you can do in 30. And if it's a cash offer, within 2 weeks, you can close it as long as they can check the title. So just keep in mind, you need to know approximately your closing date. Home warranty, if there's a home warranty, who's going to pay for the home warranty? Who's going to order the home warranty? All that's part of the contract. Repair limits. Now repairs, we're going to talk a little bit about this later on, but if you go into a house and you see a list of repairs that needs to be done up front, some agents will put it in up front in the offer. Some agents will wait for the inspection so that they can do everything at one time, okay? So it just depends on if there's anything major and y'all looking at it. I would be, having a discussion with your buyer up front is if they really want to proceed with a property that has a lot of damage. And you don't know if it's going to pass loan approval as well, okay? A cover letter. Now, I've done this sometimes. I write a cover letter explaining my offer, especially there's, I had a situation where a buyer really loved the house. They were in competition and they put a, human touch to it, their letter. So that was the buyer, the seller actually accepted their offer even though it was less. So sometimes you may want to do that with the offer. All right, any questions on writing the offer? Y'all are quiet today. Is it because it's Monday?
No,
It's
but
because-
me and Jimmy be talking at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
I was going to say it's because she's doing such a good job.
Okay, well, thank you. I teach contracts, so this is I know, Jara, what did you say?
I was gonna say something that I learned through mistake and error was something about dealing with the FHA contracts as well as the first time home buyers program with writing the offer, making sure I had that information beforehand, because I had a seller come back and they were like, oh, we knew this was soft second, we wouldn't have agreed to it. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And so just because the process is longer, so that was something I learned early on, like just make sure you're disclosing everything that you know about the loan that your buyers have.
Right.
Because he was ready to pull out.
Mm-hmm. Because it takes a longer process, particularly with soft second. There's additional inspections that need to happen. There's additional loan approval because not only does the bank have to approve, the grant program has to approve. That's even with bond money. Bond is not as long as a grant, but keep in mind, particularly with grant programs, that extra inspection and the whole process for that takes quite a long time. So on grant programs, I almost give my contracts 90 days. Now, some sellers may not want to wait that long. So that's where it's important for you to know a lot about those type of programs to see what the requirements are. So that's why it's important for you to gain knowledge of different programs and actually, communicate with lenders so that you know what type of financing programs they have. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right.
The first part of Jara's question, can she just repeat what she said? I didn't understand the first part of her question.
Okay, Jara.
My question was more of a learning curve kind of aha moment. It was something that when I was writing a contract for my client, they had a soft second program, which usually takes longer to process or go to closing. And I did not put that it was a soft second program in the offer. It was accepted. And when we started to sorry, my kids. And when we started to go through the inspection time period, we then sent them over the addendum that said it was soft second, and they were like, we wouldn't have not accepted this offer, and they were trying everything under the sun to basically pull out. And I had to do a Hail Mary and just appease them and say, look, this was my fault, not my client's fault. I got excited about it. So I was just basically saying, make sure you have an understanding of what programs they're doing, even with FHA, because it really can have an effect on whether the seller is going to accept it or not.
So soft second programs are like grants and that kind of thing. When you say soft second, that's what you mean?
Yes.
Does
Okay.
that include a VA loan or no?
No.
No. Okay. Just was wondering. Okay.
The soft second is those things like when you see those things on Facebook and you see the city is giving away money. People like you can get up to $65,000. They did it really a lot after Hurricane Katrina when people were getting all that extra money. They have to stay in the house for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
So traditional financing is FHA, VA, rural development, RD, and then conventional. Okay. Sometimes in order to encourage first-time home ownership, the parishes have grant programs that offer additional money down, and it gives the buyer more buying power. So on a traditional soft second, say for instance, if the buyer was going for an FHA loan and they would qualify for 100. If the grant program attaches an additional 35,000, then that 135,000 is what they would qualify for, and it gives them more options. And then of that 35,000, if they stay in a house for a certain period that the grant requires, and during Katrina, it was 10 years actually, I think, they don't have to pay back that portion that the grant provided. So they would only be paying on the $100,000 versus 135,000. So their note is actually based on 100,000. So it just gives them more buying power. They have different criteria. So you need to know each parish has different criteria. They're not open all the time, so you have to be familiar with when it opens. And then the state bond program, which is a statewide program, it's not a lot of down payment assistance, but it helps with closing costs. But keep in mind, the interest rate is a little bit higher on those programs. So, you know, you got to weigh the options. Your lender will weigh the options for your client. Is it better to go with a bond program with a higher interest versus a traditional FHA with a lower interest? So those things you would discuss with your lender.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. At this time, we're not going to do command because this command system is the way, and I think some states allow for you to write offers through command and present the offers through commands, okay? We're not doing that right now in Louisiana, so we're going to skip this. If we get additional information on how to do this and if that's going to be accepted, then we're going to have a separate training on writing offers. Because the way we write it now is through DocuSign. This is actually instituting an offer system through commands, okay? So we're going to skip that. All right. Offer writing guidelines, okay? So on page 6 of your participants guide, this is just a checklist on writing the offers. Hold on. I'm gonna stop share this. Oh wait, no, let me just do okay, hold on. I'm gonna give it another checklist up for you. Okay, so this is the checklist to write an offer, all right? Did we go through this? Yeah, we did this. Okay, I don't know why they're, hold on, I'm sorry. Okay. So when you're writing the offer, make sure that you, when you're writing an offer, that the buyer is giving you the earnest money deposit. Okay, y'all can see the screen, right? I just want to make sure. Okay, because it saves time, so that if they write the offer, if they give you the deposit at the time they're writing the offer, make sure they understand that this deposit will be cashed. It's not just being held by somebody, because you know, in some instances, some buyers think if I write this $1,000 that it's going to be held and not deposited. This is money toward the purchase of the home. Okay. So just keep in mind when you write, that was one more thing that wasn't discussed earlier, that they need to have because the deposit has to be turned into the seller within 72 hours. So if you write it, I know sometimes you're doing it electronically, but they need to provide that deposit check quickly because that's part of the contract, okay? All right, this is the cover letter. Let me move this around. Okay.
Hey, Nicole.
Yes.
Okay, so just back to that deposit check. Now, our office, you know, requires a copy to be put into Nicole's box, right?
Jimmy, you cut off.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're supposed to make a copy of the deposit check and then give it to Nicole. Nicole.
That is correct.
Okay, and then you had said something before about like having someone sign that they received the deposit check with like a date and time. Is that right?
I would do that because that way you can verify. You're talking about like at our office or at a title company. Usually title companies will stamp it. Our office, depending on if you're just putting it in the mail slot, just keep a copy of it so that you have proof that you received it if it comes to our office. But if say a buyer drops it off, what I usually do is tell them to make a copy of it or send me a picture to let me know that they actually, dropped it off and they wrote the check out.
Okay, yeah, I was, referring more to like if you were giving it to the listing agent.
Typically, if you're giving it to listing agent, they'll write something of receipt, particularly if you're dropping it off to their office. I know anything that comes in our office, Michelle will give you a receipt for that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other questions related to the deposit? Okay. So we talked a little bit about the cover letter. Now, I don't know. I mean, Jahar, do you do cover letters when you're presenting an offer?
Don't, but I think I will now because I think that's very clever.
Mm-hmm. Because you'll stand out, right? So it's just, you can have a standard like letter with some standard language on a description of your client's offer, just briefly saying, we're making an offer for this price, closing costs, we're asking for a home warranty, just as a summary. I've done this in an email form. Like before I send it, I don't do a formal cover letter, but I'll do an email saying, this is the offer. So in a snapshot, they'll know exactly what the offer is. Now, I said before, I've had a client, write a personal letter to the seller because they loved it. They wanted to raise their kids in this particular neighborhood. So they explained to the seller how much they would take care of their home. So it happens, you see it on HGTV all the time. But I've had that happen, and they, like I said, they accepted the offer, even though we found out later it was about $2,000 or so less than the highest offer, but that was their max. So they explained that in a letter. This is the most we can get approved for. So they humanize the offer. Okay.
I actually think that's a great idea, Nicole. Just from an agent standpoint, I think sometimes agents can be lazy. We know we have them agents and so. And I can tell you that if I get someone, it's just like when you're applying for a job. If you take that extra step, I'm more inclined to be like, okay, this person is organized. I want to work with this person. So I love this idea, and I think it's gonna push your offer a little bit further along than you may have not. Like you said, I think it's great.
All right. Anybody else opinion on the cover letter? Okay. All right. So now we're going to do some role play. So buyer objection, offer objections, okay? There are usually two common objections, and they're on page, actually 7 of your participants guide. It is common for buyers to request the seller make repairs in their offer up front, okay? And then another we talked a lot about is a lowball offer. So let's do some role play. If we're gonna have 2 participants. Who wants to do a role play on what they should say if your buyer wants the seller to make repairs? I need 2 volunteers.
I guess I'll do it.
All right, Sonda. Okay. So I'm the buyer. You're gonna tell me, give me I'm gonna say this objection. You're gonna let me know what would you say. Hint, hint. It's in your participants guide on page 7. If I want to write an offer that the seller makes repairs, okay? so we're talking and I'm like, okay, so I really need the seller to repair, actually put up a fence. They need to repair, paint the whole house. They need to, let's put in an offer that we're gonna ask for some carpet allowance. So can we do that?
Um, yes, we could do that. Or maybe we can just offer a little less money up front and we can do the repairs ourselves. Is that something that you would be willing to think about?
Well, I wouldn't know how much it is. So how much would we offer less? Like how much would these repairs cost, you think?
Well, I mean, that's something that we can talk to somebody about and they could kind of give us an estimate on what they think it would cost. I don't think that would take much time to do,
Okay.
especially if you really like the house.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, we can do that. We can reduce the price a little bit. So should we take off like $10,000?
Well, let's look at what repairs are needed and then we will go from there. We don't want to take less off and not be able to cover what it is that you need to have repaired. So we just want to make sure that we kind of have a good estimate on what those repairs are going to cost.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the house. The house really needs to be painted completely. So that's at least $5,000 just to paint the house. So I'm
Well,
laughing because Jahar knows, right? So the reason why I said that was because when I'm listing a house and it needs to be painted, you know, in a buyer's mind, it costs thousands of dollars to paint the house. And if you ask your seller, can you just freshen it up a little bit? It might cost them $100, right? But in a buyer's mind, they're taking thousands of dollars off for these repairs. So on a listing side, you might want to just, when you go through the house and say things that you recommend, just keep that in mind because in a buyer's eyes, those things will cost a lot more than if the seller was to do that. Okay. Great job, Tonda. One of the other things you might want to say was you might want to wait for the inspection so that we can add, you know, those things into the inspection request. Okay.
okay, I thought about that. I did think it crossed my mind.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and
Who wants-
I've had buyers. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump
No,
in,
go ahead,
but
Jimmy. Go ahead.
yeah, I've had buyers, you know, when they do their first walkthrough, you know, they say, okay, yeah, we're going to probably give you an offer, but we want our contractor to come through and just take a look at it so they can get a price on, you know, what might need to be done.
Right. But keep in mind, time is of essence. If you're in a hot market, you need to do that relatively quickly, okay? Because you don't want to lose out on waiting for contractors to come out to give you estimates, okay?
Yeah, it's usually been within one day.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you might have to get, you know, work with your contractors and your partners, your affiliates to find out, you know, approximately how much this will cost to be repaired. So you can get an idea when you're writing an offer, you know, this probably will cost you about $100, $200, you know, so you can have an idea. So that's some of the things you might want to obtain some knowledge about on the cost of things. Relative, like you can't they can't hold you to it, but just at least to give them an idea so they won't be unrealistic on how much it costs to paint the house. Okay, so let's do a scenario on they want to make a lowball offer. Who wants to do that?
I'll do it.
All right, Miss Ashley.
God.
We're going through this right now, so we're going to see how you negotiated that. Okay, so the house is listed for 180 and they want to write an offer for 160. Okay,
Okay.
so how do you handle that?
You can make well, just read it from the script, right? You can make a little offer and run the risk of the seller rejecting it or countering back with a full price to compensate.
Okay, well, if they just reject it, does that mean that they just they're not interested in selling?
Wait. I was gonna mess this up because I'm trying to read the script. Oh, gee. No. Can we? Okay, so repeat it. Let's start all over. Because I was trying to read the script, but I guess it's not
So
there.
the reason why I'm throwing some monkey wrenches because you may have a buyer who is persistent on wanting to write a lowball offer.
Well, that's
so
the problem I'm having. I'm trying to explain it to him like this, but he keeps like over.
I
saying that he wants to
understand.
stay at a low price.
Right. So you need to throw back at him some objection handlers. So you already talked about the seller rejecting the offer. Okay. Things we talked about earlier is showing them list to sale price. How close are the homes that are selling close to their list price? Right?
Yes.
Okay. What type of market we're in? Some of those things you need to throw back at that person. All right. So give me another handler. Do number 2 or 3.
Okay. You can make an offer closer to the asking price and be less flexible if there is a counter offer.
Okay. What about number 3?
If you really want this home and are concerned with that another buyer might purchase it, you might ask full price offer and give the seller what they want.
Okay.
Okay. And that's what I did that one yesterday, but that didn't work.
Okay. But does he really want the house?
Yes.
Okay. If he really wants the house, then he should make an offer closer to what the seller wants. So you got to dig deep into the actual buyer's motivation, right? Will he risk someone else coming along and offering a higher price offer? Because if it's the house that he wants, like I think it was Jahar earlier said, do you want to miss out on this dream home? Right? The home that you love.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any questions on those? Because that's the 2 things up front when you're writing an offer. The 2 main objections are repair issues up front and always wanting to write a lowball offer because they want to get a deal. You was about to say something, Ashley?
No.
Okay. Any questions on how to handle those objections? Okay. So now we're going to talk about presenting the offer.
One more question. Sorry.
Okay.
So when you have a lowball offer and then the seller comes back, how long? Do you keep going back and forth with the seller? Or you just?
Well, after maybe 2 to 3 offers, and they keep rejecting it, the sellers, if they countered you twice, 9 times out of 10, they're going to reject the next one. Move on, because they're not going to continue to. Y'all can't come to meeting of the minds. It's not a win-win situation. The seller wants their price and the buyer wants their price. Have either an unrealistic buyer or an unrealistic seller. But if you have the comps to support, if the seller has comps to support it, then they're going to stick to their price. I had a situation about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, where the seller was adamant about their price. My buyer loved this home. We went into it knowing it will never appraise. We're talking probably a good $15,000 difference. After I talked to the agent, he was like, oh, the seller's not budging. They've rejected at least 10 offers. They're not budging. I said, okay. So let's get
buyer. I don't know if you're breaking up for everyone else, but you're breaking up.
Can y'all hear now?
Better now.
Better now.
Okay. So we put in the offer, if the house did not appraise, then the seller will reimburse my client the cost of their inspections and appraisal fee. All right. Okay. Guess what? It didn't appraise. We were right. I was right on the comps to begin with. The house actually appraised for like $20,000 less. And what happened was they had to sell it because it was number one. They needed to go, and they decided to reduce it by 20,000. So sometimes,
The
you
missing
know,
part of that story. What happened with the seller?
the seller wind up having to sell a house for 20,000 less because of the appraisal. However, they did take off the closing costs. My buyer was willing to do that. My buyer was actually willing to pay the difference. That's how bad he wanted this house. But sometimes, you know, when a seller is adamant and this buyer loves the house and they are approved for it, you know, you want to try it, but then also have some kind of contingency for your buyer when you're writing that offer. Okay.
That's a great idea. I actually have one where we went back a couple of times. The house needs a lot of repair. It's a house that's dated but solid foundation. And again, my buyer loves the house, but I think the buyer's just being unrealistic. He has the house priced like it's in excellent condition, and it hasn't been updated since 1970. So he just wants what he wants.
But it's clean, so it's in excellent condition, right?
Right.
I love that when they put this is in excellent condition and nothing has been upgraded. Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And for someone who is, I'm sorry, maybe 90 and looking, well, what's wrong with this house? It looks good to me. Well, have you been in any new houses lately? I'm sorry.
Exactly. And then the listing agent will list it as excellent and like, okay, where did you get excellent out of this listing? So yeah, it's so funny. Have you ever been in a house where the pictures showed it was in excellent condition? You're like, who took these pictures? Because it's not in excellent condition when you walk in the house.
Yes, indeed.
So keep that in mind. All right. Anything else? We're going to talk about now presenting the offer. All right. So again, you need to know, you need to be in constant communication with the listing agent. One of the things that I do is it says notify the listing agent of an incoming offer. What I do, of course, call the listing agent, but as I'm about to send the offer, and I text the agent saying I'm sending you an offer, right? I'll text them. Then when I send the offer, I email the offer. Plus I text them saying I just sent you an offer. Please confirm. Because you want to make sure that the listing agent receives the offer. Okay. It says send the offer to the agent, set a deadline. Of course, the deadline is in the contract. This says create an offer in command. Just make sure you know, when you write, do the opportunity section in command and consult with your buyer with the seller's response. So when the seller receives the response, I mean, when the buyer, when you receive the response from the buyer, I mean, the seller, make sure that you communicate the things that the seller has stated in there, if they've, especially if they've countered you or if they rejected you, okay? The biggest thing is, in this situation, you want to communicate with that particular agent that they're, you know, you're sending an offer and making sure that they received an offer, okay? So now let's role play on presenting the offer. On page 21 of your script book, okay. Who wants to role play on presenting the offer? Well, I mean, let's role play on the next one. Let's change that, okay? So now let's move to the seller side. So now you're representing the seller. You were representing the buyer. Now we're going to represent the seller, okay? So the listing agent receives the offer. They gather information about the buyer. They will present the offer to their client and then respond to the offer, okay? Again, we're working on a win-win situation. So you want to communicate to your seller what's in the best interest for them, all right? So you should have the checklist for reviewing an offer. Let's review that. Okay, the first and foremost, one thing you want to do is thank the buyer agent for the offer. You want to make sure that, you know, you, as a seller, as a listing agent, that you thank them because they've written an offer. Okay. so that goes a long way when you're working with the agents and you're communicating with them. So as the listing agent, you want to get as much information about that buyer. So you want to ask them how long, ask the agent, the seller agent, have they been pre-approved? Hopefully they've submitted the pre-approval letter with the offer. Do they have to sell a home ahead of time? Some of those things are, of course, it's in the offer, but when you're communicating with that agent over the phone, you want to kind of know some of those things up front, right? Even why they selected the property, because if you knew that and they didn't write a letter as you presenting it to your seller, you can kind of let them know they have small kids and they really want to be in this neighborhood. This question says, have they made offers on other properties? If so, what happened with the negotiations? I don't know if I would answer that as a buyer's agent, but you can probe as much as you can. How long they've been looking for it. If they're out of town, why are they moving in this area? Just get as much information if you're the listing agent as possible, where you won't break confidentiality, but just to understand why they're writing an offer on the property. One of the things you also want to ask about closing costs. So just keep in mind some of those things. So you want to review your offer. Okay, you receive the offer, make sure the address is correct, because trust me, I've seen situations where they put street instead of drive. And then when they had a situation, I remember where they wrote an offer and it had the street, say ABC Street, right? When they went to do the title work, it was actually, it should have been ABC Lane. So make sure that the address is correct, and that you didn't invert numbers. Check to see whether offer falls in the range of seller's expectation. So you're going to prepare when they submit the offer. If they're $20,000 less, you got to understand those objections that the seller is going to raise, as to why this offer is so low. Okay. Make sure the earnest money is in there. Time of acceptance, you want to read that last page to know how much time that you should respond back from the offer. Pre-approval, loan approval, financing, we talked a lot about that, and closing date. Make sure that if there's any HOA fees as you write, I forgot to say, when you're writing the offer, so that you know that there's an HOA fee that should be disclosed in the MLS. Make sure they submitted to you all of the disclosures. So as the listing agent, just like you have a checklist for when you're presenting, you need to have a checklist when you're reviewing the offer to be prepared for when you discuss it with your seller, okay? All right, let me move this around. Okay, so you're about to present the offer to your seller, okay? You want to present the offer as soon as possible. Even if you can't email it to them right away, at least call them and let them know you receive an offer, and you can just highlight the offer and let them know, I'm going to call you at a certain time to discuss the offer in further detail once you have time to review it. Okay. So you want to present that offer as soon as you receive it. Okay. You want to provide them with an updated CMA, because if you have, when you listed the property and it's been 90 days and you're receiving the offer, properties may have changed a little bit. So you want to review a CMA before, so that you can give them an idea, that homes are selling for either less than what we thought when we were first listing a house. Now, periodically, you should be checking that anyway, so that you can talk to your client in case they needed a price reduction. But you always want to do an updated CMA so that you can have any objections related to price, because you can have that as an objection coming back to say, you know what, prices have dropped a little bit. So this is a solid offer for you. You want to present the offer to your seller. You want to go over the price. You want to go over the contingencies. What's the motivation from the buyer if you had a conversation with the agent? And then the next thing is to make a decision, right? Do you want to accept this offer and get you closer to moving with your family in Florida? Uncover their motivation on why they need to sell. Make it humanized for them. Do they want to counter or do they want to reject it? Now, I highly, highly recommend that you try not to reject the offer. Even if you go back and present them with a counter that's a little bit less than the current list price. I always highly encourage my sellers to counter an offer. What's some of your thoughts about that?
Even when it's a horrible offer, I,
You know,
like you, encourage them to counter or, say something to it. Don't just reject it. What I've heard it said before, it's better than the one we had yesterday, which was none.
correct. That's great to say. At least the buyer took the time to write an offer. We got an offer. I had a situation where I'm working with one of the agents and they have a house that's listed. The house has been on the market now for 6 months. Okay. They finally got an offer and the seller refused to accept it. And there are $2,000 difference between what the buyer's willing to pay or can pay, because that's the max, and what the seller wants. There's no money owed on the house as a succession property, but they're holding off for a better offer. Okay. The taxes and the maintenance of the house is $2,000, right? But they wouldn't budge, So sometimes you have sellers that are unrealistic, but always, always try to get your seller to counter the offer.
I just got a counter. It said, "Are you playing games? I'm trying to buy a house." I can't.
Exactly. Now the seller's upset, right?
Yes.
Okay.
indeed.
Because your buyer is nitpicking over $1,000, right? So now the seller is like, I'm done with you. So you don't want to actually get the seller mad with you. So that's why you really got to encourage your buyers to be realistic. You want to be calm. You want to, keep things positive as much as possible. In your situation, So, if the seller sees that you're calm and professional, they're going to seek your advice. So just the whole goal is a win-win, not to have one side upset with the other. Okay. All right.
Okay, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe it's more of a comment because I don't see it on here. When I had my listing, we got the offer and they wanted closing costs and they wanted this and that. And so I went through and did one of those net sheets for the sellers to show them, what they were going to get net. And then we came back with a counter saying, well, if you want this, then you have to go over list price in order to get all these concessions. And excuse me. And they ended up accepting that offer.
Right. So sometimes
and the sellers knew what they were going to get out of it because I did that net sheet, but I don't see doing that on any of these slides here.
So a net sheet is important. So when I do a CMA, I do two things. When I first list a house, I'm doing a net sheet with different price ranges for my seller. Okay. So as I get this offer, part of when I submit it to them, I'm doing an updated net sheet because they already know kind of their ranges up front when we list it. So now that they have the offer, they have closing costs and all of that included. Now, what is the bottom line for your seller? And then if we're going to counter the offer, when I communicate back to the agent, this is, what can we do to get your buyer closer if they really need closing costs? So we're going to have to raise the price to compensate it and have it included in their loan because my seller is not going below this, So you just got to figure out a way on both sides for it to win for both parties. But again, stay positive.
Yeah, that's what happened with my sellers. They had because it was a succession property with multiple sellers, they had an idea of what they wanted to get out of it. And so the buyers ended up agreeing so that the closing costs ended up going on into their mortgage payment.
Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. So never criticize a lowball offer or a negative offer to your seller. So never go and say, I know this is a low ball offer. And I know it's not what you want, you know, because then you've already set the tone to the seller like, okay, I'm not even going to deal with this. You always go in it saying, we got an offer. Okay, so let's talk about the offer. All right. Just stay as positive and excited about the offer, even though it may be too low. Okay. Why are you laughing, Stephanie?
Say, look, don't shoot the messenger, because some of them, you know, are totally ridiculous. Anyway,
Again, we got an offer. We're excited. All right. Sometimes the agent is more excited because we finally got an offer. All right.
Yeah, I try to deal with it, excuse me, as if, you know, this is my property too. Let's, you know, work on it as a team where I'm also a seller. So this is my best interest. I'm looking at your best interest.
Exactly. So let's do some role play. Who's next? So on page 21 of your script book, they have some scripts on. Let's just do a role play on. Okay, the offer is $20,000 less, and you're on the seller side. You're the listing agent. How do you present this to your client? What would you say? Okay, Stephanie, you're laughing, so you're gonna role play.
I'm trying to unmute. Okay, is there a script, or I'm going off the cuff? We got
Just
an
go.
offer.
There is a script for that, but I'm sure you can do this. Okay.
We got an offer.
So the scenario is, it's $20,000 less, and they want $6,000 in closing costs and a home warranty.
Look, you saw my face. Okay. Look, they're asking for the sun, the moon, the stars, and the sky. Okay. Hello, Mrs. Seller. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I am happy today because I have an offer to present to you.
Oh, you do?
I do. We got, you know, we have an offer for $150,000. Look, you're listed for 170 in the show. Nicole, sorry. You're listed for 170, but we got this offer for 150. Now let me outline everything that they're asking for. They've asked for closing cost assistance of 3%, and they also want a home warranty. Now let me present to you where you will be if you accepted this offer. And I want you to look at that and then consider, you know, the offer that we got yesterday.
That's way low than we wanted. I'm not going to give my house away now.
Well, I'm not asking you to give it away, but we also have to keep in mind that we have to go with what's happening in the market. If there's no demand in this area, or if there's no demand at the price that you're asking, people are going to do their comps. They're going to do their homework. Let me ask you this. Would you buy this house at this price?
Yeah, I love my house.
Even if I showed you that houses in the area were going for 160, you would buy this house?
Yeah, I just can't give my house away, Stephanie. It's just, I got a fixed price, and I gotta move, and I just need a certain amount.
Okay, well, let me show you. So how far off are we on what you're looking to get and what is being presented right now?
So now we're talking like $25,000 difference. Oh, we're gonna have to maybe just at least get 10,000 more in here, because you know, maybe we can raise the price up by 10,000. And why I gotta pay for their closing costs? Why they need closing costs?
Well, that can be negotiated as well. Okay, if we agree to a certain amount, you have to look at how much you're looking to net. Okay, and as long as you're getting, you know, what you need to net within reason, it's okay to pay their closing costs because it doesn't hurt your bottom line. You got to look at what you're going to net after this is all over. Don't look at so much that you are giving them money. You're helping them with the, you know, they're essentially, if they go above a certain price, they're essentially financing their closing costs, as they may need the money for repairs afterwards, or some fix-ups, or painting or stuff like that, to personalize the property. So don't look at it so much as you're paying for their closing costs. Look at what you're netting, and if you're okay with that, then why wouldn't you approve it?
Okay, so let's just counter, add 10,000, whatever they want to do with their closing costs, but give me at least 10,000 more. Can we do that?
We can do that. That would be a starting point, and let's see where it goes.
Now, Stephanie, I'm not doing any repairs either now. I'm giving them some money. They're not gonna get repairs too.
I do understand, and we will let them know that present, because they have to be reasonable just like you do.
All right. Okay. Awesome. And the reason why I do those objections, because we hear it all the time.
And that's what I was gonna say. Some of the scripts that they're assuming that whoever the other party is gonna cave automatically. Sometimes, no, not necessarily. You're gonna have to come up and be ready. Because I had one this weekend where I had to. I've had the property listed for 6 months, and I've been asking the seller to reduce the price. He finally agreed to reduce the price, and those were some of the objections or some of the counters that I've made to some of his points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you definitely got to keep your eye on the pulse of the market, because you'll have a seller in their mind, they have a certain price and the market has shifted, and so you got to let them know the market shifted. You can't get this price anymore.
Been there, done that. Look, had one, was under contract, and we finally reduced it and got an offer the next day. Full price, cash, closing in 2 weeks. Let me think about it, is what he said.
Well,
Didn't
this is
close.
where you should have been.
Did not close. What can you do when the seller stops talking to you?
Yeah.
And anybody that's connected with it, they just stop answering the phone.
Oh my goodness. That's not as motivated seller.
Asked him that prior to us getting there. I said, if I brought you a full price offer, what would you say? Oh, yeah. Well, that was just playing a role.
Uh-huh. All right. Okay. Any questions related to presenting the offer to your seller? Okay. All right. Okay. So responding to the offer. Of course, there's three ways you can respond. We talked about that. A seller can accept it, counter it, or reject it. All right. Okay. I think y'all get. Okay. So if you were responding to an offer, now you're on the buyer side. Let's go back on the buyer side. So the seller has responded. Now you're representing the buyer. How do you respond to the seller? So the seller, came back and met you pretty much halfway. So what do you say to your buyer if you're the buyer's agent?
Come on, Jimmy.
I would say, okay, so the seller came back with a counter offer, and we have three choices. We can either accept it, we can re-counter it, or we can reject it. So let me take a few minutes here and go through this counter offer with you and see what you think.
Mm-hmm. So remember, counter offers is better than rejecting it. So at least we're in negotiations now. You didn't insult them by lowballing them, and they didn't just flat out rejected you, right? And then if it's I always say don't haggle over a couple of $1,000s, right? Because in the scheme of it, and one of the things the buyer has no clue is that sometimes they just want the last negotiation. I want it at this price and that's it as a buyer, right? If you realize $1,000 is like $7 off of a $7 on a mortgage every month, okay? It's approximately that, depending on the interest rate. So you're really gonna lose your dream house over $7 extra in monthly payment. So that's one of the things that I use, is because they don't conceptualize it. They're thinking it's $1,000 and they wanna win. And really they're gonna lose out over a $7 payment, okay? So put it in terms of money for them. Right? That could be it. Okay. Any other strategy you use for those experienced agents out there? Okay. All righty. So let's talk about ahas for the class. So how does your thinking change? What do you feel differently? What actions are you going to take?
I'm gonna use that cover letter. I
Yeah.
love it.
Woohoo.
Mhm.
What else?
Yeah, I like the cover letter idea too, but I mean, it just my is that I feel more comfortable because of the way that I've been is the way that you've been.
Okay, so some reassurance on the process. Okay, cool. Miss Ashley, you got any tips for today?
Yes, I guess I need to learn how to do comps, to keep running comps. I mean, I ran the comps, but I didn't prepare it like you prepared it.
Okay.
Just looking at, so I guess I need to start doing that more.
And
Learn
we're
how to
having
do that. I need to learn how to do it right
and
first.
we're having that class tonight, so please be a part of our class tonight on CMAs.
I will.
All right. What else? What's some other ahas? Who hasn't spoken that's out there?
I'm gonna learn how to use the twos until I can learn to negotiate.
All right. So tomorrow is going to be about negotiation of contracts. So you're going to get more information tomorrow. Anything else? Okay.